Thank you for inviting me today to speak. It's truly an honor. Before we begin, I guess can we have a show of hands? Who spends at least an hour in commute every day? That's back and forth. Yeah, I guess it's most of us. The ones who don't spend at least that much time are very lucky. And it's really one of the effects of development trend in the last few decades. We've been building single-use structures for the last few decades, and coupled with a few other factors like subpar urban planning or very weak implementation, it really contributes to the sprawl of cities like Manila, Jakarta, Mexico City, which also have very bad traffic problems along with it. So surely there are valid reasons for creating segmented areas. No one, for example, in their right mind would want to live next to an industrial factory. But it has really created more problems for us. We travel greater distances, we spend more time in our commute every day. And if we're spending 1 hour each day, and that's really quite normal already for us, that's 5 hours a week at least, and that's for work alone. So you don't even count the time we spend on commute when we go out with friends or our families. So a very normal weekday for any employee is he lives in maybe northern Quezon City, travels more than 15 kilometers to work and back each day. And the reason being is that we've really created artificial islands in our city. So we have residential areas in the north and south, and we have our CBDs in Makati and Ortigas, and then for entertainment we go elsewhere. So one of the recent trends, and we've heard the earlier speakers talk a lot about this, is a mixed-use development. That is, I think, at its core, a return to a more livable community setting. But it presents both unique opportunities and challenges during the development. So properties that have different components to it, whether it's a whole township, a whole city, or just a single structure that have different components, those are all mixed use. So there are 4 main opportunities I see in mixed-use developments. The most obvious is the physical synergy and cross-pollination opportunities. I'll be using examples from my experience with building Marco Polo, and I'd like to show you a short clip before I start, just so you get an idea of what it is for those of you who haven't been. Could we play, please? So the building is actually 45 stories. Most of it is taken up by the hotel, but we also have a few floors for offices. So it's a mixed-use building. So what I was saying about physical synergy and cross-pollination, it's really about different components of the development driving businesses, driving guests, driving customers into other components of the business. So in our case, Marco Polo has a hotel and the office. So tenants in their offices are really a captured market for the hotel. If they have out-of-town guests, they booked in the hotel. If they have corporate functions, then they do it in our ballroom, in our function rooms. And if they have lunch meetings, the executive need to do lunch meetings with other people, then they can do it in our food and beverage outlets. Similarly, the other way around, foreign guests staying in the hotel also appreciate that there's the office component in the same building. I think one tenant partner we have is Regis, and they've been really popular with the business people who have been coming in recently to take a look at the development in the Philippines and in Manila and looking to set up a branch here. And they appreciate having space to go work in for a short period of time. And also on the operations side, there are also other synergies that we can do. For example, in engineering, in security, we're able to employ shared services within the development itself to drive better value and also take best practices from different components. So a properly done mixed-use development also increases the attractiveness of the whole property as a destination for its guests. We can see this in the live, work, and play. That's why bigger developers are all about this live, work, and play concept in their townships. People can make their home, make a living, spend, entertain themselves, all within a few minutes walk, and without the trouble of going through rush hour traffic. And on smaller scale properties, it's also possible to do the same. So it really creates a more convenient and comfortable work day, for example, for people. One of the things that I personally really appreciated since we moved into the building was that before, if we had a lunch meeting with someone, you had to go like an hour or at least 30 minutes before to make sure you get there in time. But these days, I just leave my office 5 minutes before. I can make it right on time. And also, this similar setup can be found in other kinds of developments with offices on top of commercial areas. You know, you really drive you're able to allow your tenants, workers, go to the retail area to enjoy their lunch or after work drinks. Another opportunity we see is creating a sense of community in the local area. So you really increase the attractiveness of the whole locality, not just your development, but the whole area. It creates a more livable area that's less isolated, is more pedestrian-friendly, less dependent on vehicular traffic. And it can diversify the local economy. So one of the issues really facing CBDs is that it empties out after work. After 9 p.m., on weekends, on holidays, it's really empty. And you see, when you go through a CBD on these days, you see a lot of those shops, even Starbucks, they're all closed on weekends. So CBDs turn into ghost towns, and in some locations, in older downtown locations, you even find that maybe there's increased crime because of this. On the other hand, residential areas are empty most of the day during the week. And then you've got the shops that are serving these residential areas basically sitting empty most of the week. So allowing a more stable flow of business, as well as different businesses to flourish, would really boost the local economy and make the community more vibrant. And as to increase pedestrian traffic, this would have external societal benefits. I think it's been mentioned earlier by the earlier speakers. It promotes better health, and also it lessens the pollution that is contributed by vehicular traffic. But I think the most interesting opportunity I can see, at least from a developer's perspective, is a diversified revenue and cash flow model. So let's break that down a bit. Diversified revenue, each component has a different revenue stream, and these revenue streams are not necessarily correlated. In fact, some of them are very minimally correlated. So you've got, for example, from our hotel and office, you've got a hotel that is dependent on transient guests. So, and can potentially earn higher revenue on a per area basis at certain times. But also you've got a more stable, it's anchored by a more stable rent from the offices, which are on longer term contracts. So really the development can take advantage of both short-term demand and long-term demand. And in unexpected downturns, then you're also assured that some parts of the business will be able to support the whole development to keep it viable. And this necessarily flows to cash flow. Especially, this is most obvious in residential, retail components, for example, where you get upfront cash from the buyers of the residential units, while still having a residual cash flow through the retail component once everyone moves in. So this complementary cash flow model really creates opportunities for developers that they may otherwise not have. And you really don't have to choose between an upfront as against an upfront return, which may be more cyclical, depending on the current economic outlook, as against the more stable residual return. On the other hand, there are also special challenges that go with this kind of development, for most of which is that it's harder to find a site that really is suitable for mixed-use development. So finding a site means the size, the access, location, the orientation of the lot maybe, and the location. So a mixed-use development will probably necessitate a larger site in order to accommodate the additional facilities, the additional circulation, the additional access points that you would need. For example, a normal office building would probably be able to go with one frontage. But if you start to add other components into the development, then probably you would need an even larger frontage or perhaps access from another side of the lot. Yeah, so additional access is critical, of course, because you don't want, for example, your hotel guests running into the wrong places, into your office tenants' offices, for example. Also, each component may have different orientation and location requirements, such as residential components that may benefit from a more spectacular view, which would drive up their value, whereas retail would probably demand higher population density, which would maybe mean that there are taller buildings around the area. And of course, there are also financial considerations. Some components really may appear more attractive in some ways than others, depending on the developer's priorities. However, one thing that we have to look at is that some components may not have on paper, a very attractive return, but it may yield intangible benefits to the development. For example, in a hotel may not be necessarily as attractive as selling condominiums. However, having a hotel within a mixed-use development with condos would drive up the sales value of those residential units. Also, building mixed-use developments are more expensive. It's slightly more expensive than single-use structures due to added complexity in planning and construction. So a simple example would be the different requirements for ventilation and cooling systems. So air conditioning. Larger hotels would require probably the centralized chilled water systems because these are more efficient to run in the long term. But this would not really be applicable to a residential or to an office segment because they would want the flexibility that comes with other systems such as VRF or split type. And of course, this also applies for other components of the developments such as plumbing and electrical. So in relation to this, there are different expertise needed in effectively managing a mixed-use project. During planning, during pre-construction, during construction, and through to operations. So it's for example, in Marco Polo, it's very critical to know the right areas program we need to allocate and how to lay it out. You don't want to lay it out in such a way that you increase later costs due to inefficiencies. And you also want to make sure that your guest experience or your tenant's experience of the property is very good. You don't want to build something that is awkward in order to just fit everything in. So there are different activities and skills managing pre-operations. So there are different consultants, there are different people who can market offices to tenants. There are different people who can sell a residential unit to prospective buyers. There are different people who will be able to sell your hotel rooms, for example, to corporate accounts. And one of the key areas we were very challenged with during the construction of the Marco Polo was the technical services available, or rather technical service experience available in the country. As you all know, the hotel boom in the Philippines is very recent. I mean, most of the new hotels we see have been built in the last maybe 3 years. And as a result, most architects, engineers, and other talents, and even contractors, they've really cut their teeth on other kinds of projects. They've cut their teeth on residential. They've cut their teeth on offices. And these are totally different developments. I think one of our speakers earlier mentioned that hotels are really very specialized products. And I think the same thing can be said about the others. So when you pick consultants and when you pick contractors, you really need to take a look at what experience they have and what they can bring on to the development. And like I said before, they use different systems, different acceptable designs. So for example, in residential setup, you've really got units that are sold off to different owners. So anything that you need to fix has to be fixable within that unit, which is not the same for a hotel room, because the hotel management has control of the rooms. Therefore, they're able to access pipes, for example, from different areas, or so that you can actually prioritize other aspects of the construction, such as the aesthetics. So once operation starts, similar thing. You've got different skills that you need in dealing with office tenants as against hotel guests, as against running a residential condominium corporation, as against running an office building property management. And the biggest challenge for the developer is really creating the right balance for different interests and different priorities of the components, while ensuring it keeps the characteristics of that it needs for the whole development. So components will compete for different things, like prime real estate, like the ground floor. Everyone will fight for the ground floor. They all want the big frontage. Building naming rights and signage, they all want the highly visible spot, as well as construction budgets and overall development aesthetics. And major tenants will want some recognition as well of their presence and what they bring into the development. So that's really a challenge for the developer to balance. So just to wrap it all up, I think what we need is that really we have to have real clear project objectives. Not just financial, but really what is this project supposed to bring into the local community? What are we trying to achieve with this project? And what does each component deliver? So I think throughout the project, when we come to any decision points, this is really something to keep in mind. Another thing is find competent and experienced project team. And I cannot stress enough the experience part, because each component is again very different. So you need people who are passionate, who have a strong sense of integrity, who are open-minded, who have the relevant experience to run this thing. And I think the last one is to have a realistic pre-construction timeline to allow for the plans to be made and for it to be reviewed. Because, you know, this I think is one of the things that a lot of new developers would try to crunch. But really, at the end of the day, you don't want your operations team to come back to you and tell you that, oh, we got to knock down this wall because it doesn't add anything and it destroys the flow. And we've already put in money to put up that wall, and now we're going to put in money to destroy it. So it's really important for us to make sure that there's a realistic pre-construction timeline to ensure proper reviews. And I just want to end by saying that at the end of the day, mixed-use developments really address a basic human need for social interaction. So we're trying to make places where we can be with other people, we can enjoy life with other people, work with other people. And I think it's important for this to start right at the birth of a project, where the project team gets together and comes up with a plan. Thank you.